Hi, my name is Will Hurd, and this is the technical proficiency test for. So right off the bat, I had a few goals in mind. I wanted to be creative and original, I wanted to work hard, and I wanted the video to be my deliverable. I had a few ideas for what I wanted to do that involved, specific video game targets. I wanted to involve science and physics, maybe some hardware, wise demonstrations, synth patches, old projects that I've done, or perhaps a combo of all of the set above. I knew I really wanted to stick with the God of War franchise, which was one of my favorite games of all time. There exists a sound in this game that I absolutely love. Those low baritone voices. So I thought it'd be a really cool idea to build an instrument with a single performer that could produce those same low, powerful voices that give me chills every time I hear them. So I came up with a couple concept designs that didn't quite pan out. Some of them were pretty tough to manufacture, required a lot of money, and more importantly, required electricity, which I really didn't want since this was an instrument based around a time where electricity wasn't really a thing. But I definitely knew my method involved some kind of singular chamber that split off into multiple chambers to create those different kinds of voices. So again, no DSP, no electricity, something a little bit more easy to manufacture. So I went ahead and crossed this idea off the list, but took some of the pros along with it, and really ran off with the idea of labyrinths. In other words, squiggles in a pipe, where different lengths of pipe would cause the voices to come out at different times, different diameters and resonant frequencies of the pipe would cause these kind of detuning of the vocals, similar to the amateur drawing seen here. I also knew I needed some kind of chamber, some kind of reflective metal to kind of surround it and sort of give it that cathedral-esque ambiance to the vocal itself. So the plan was really a wood box with a bunch of pipes and a metal enclosure surrounding it. I definitely don't have the vocal power to overcome the energy losses, but maybe a pro singer would. Here's one of the formulas I used to determine some of the resonant frequencies that I wanted for some of my pipes. You'll see soon why this quickly fell off, but I did want to have some kind of sense of how big this instrument was going to be. I also wanted to keep the diameters of the pipes in mind, knowing that smaller pipes would transmit less energy, but larger pipes would transmit more to kind of create this choir of people, so to say. So, lo and behold, my Mona Lisa. I'm not really sure why, but I thought it would be really cool to try and create this chorus effect, despite it being really easy with the click of a couple buttons to do this in a normal DAW. I thought it'd be a cool way to kind of explore some of the possibilities of how this effect might be created if you don't have a choir per se. And yes, I originally thought that I was going to put a 3D printed Kratos in front of this instrument at first, but that was like $4,000, so I tossed that out the window. I tried to keep the theme of the game in mind, creating 9 pipes representing the 9 realms. And me being my science physics geek, tried to calculate all these numbers out, only to realize that Home Depot has fixed diameter piping. I figured if I bought just some different variations in diameter with the same length, I could toss a penny inside, perform a sine sweep, see where it resonated and hear the penny kind of rattling, and then kind of work from there. I started mapping out some of the dimensions that I was going to need for the wooden box, the holes, the metal enclosures that were surrounding it, and all the sort of kind of details and drawings of how I was sort of going to put this together. I definitely got a little over specific with some of this stuff, but I assumed the more details, the better. So with all my details ready to go, I packed up all of my stuff, gave a call to my parents, told them I was going to use their garage, gathered all my world-class recording gear, packed it up into my car, can't forget this bad boy for the weekend, grabbed a nice healthy breakfast, and headed on out to the suburbs. I put together a list of all the items I would need from Home Depot, including a bunch of wood, sheet metal, safety gear, bending metal, 2x4s, fasteners, flanges, a bunch of other stuff, but I ended up slightly changing my plans based on some of the pricing, but I found some cool things, including this sheet metal that made some really cool noise. After racking up dozens and dozens of items, I strapped some stuff to the top of my car, scraping it in the process, filled my car to the brim, and I was on the road with a high likelihood that a pothole would break my windshield or I would take off in flight. So here's all the materials I got kind of laid out. A bunch of sheet metal, some spray paint, yada yada. I also borrowed some gear from my dad and decided to start with the enclosure first. I figured I'd use an industrial stapler to secure all the sheet metal, but clearly that didn't work. So I had to improvise. I basically just drilled holes in all the sheet metal and secured them with a little fastener and nut. But as you can see, the thing was really flimsy and almost impossible to carry up into my attic where I plan to record. After reinforcing the sheet metal with wood, it made it a lot easier to carry it around, and I went ahead and started spray painting the entire metal piece. This is what the center frame turned out to look like after paint, and then these were some of the side flaps that I was going to use. Pretty sweet reflective material. I also went ahead and spray painted some of the piping ahead of time, which kind of pissed my parents off because it left white lines in the grass. But come on, it's for a gig with I then went ahead and started marking out some of the drawings for the wooden pieces and went ahead and started cutting. I had no idea what I was doing here, but I ended up getting somewhat close. Used a sander to kind of touch up some of the more bristly stuff and went ahead and started assembling the box. I added some reinforcement into the box, knowing that it was going to support 9 different electrical conduit pipes, but as you can see, some of the carpentry that I did here was not my finest work. I also decided to add a piece of sheet metal inside that would kind of reflect the sound upward towards the pipes. Now, in terms of bending these pipes, this was by far the most challenging part. Shout out to my dad for the assist. Now, of course, I added some flair to the main backing piece and began to assemble it. First by securing that main backing piece to the box, and then eventually taking the side pieces and securing them as well. I wanted to make a version of Kratos' head on it, but ran out of spray paint cans on 2 different occasions, so I decided to move on and start installing the pipes with the flanges. I already had some pretty cool sounds that you could hear just from hitting the pipes themselves, so I was really excited to start recording into this thing after I drilled a hole in the back. And lo and behold, the final product. Did I mention the pipes were hard to bend? It was now time for my least favorite part, singing. I pulled the original score from Barry McCreary and found these lyrics, which I had absolutely no idea how to pronounce, so I literally made up my own words to kind of read off and sing from. Brace yourselves. Ooh, no. God damn it. Datasis. Ooh, ooh, early, fuck. Things were going great. Ooh, ooh. God damn. I wanted a bass, tenor, and soprano version to have some extra layers. Once my recordings were set, I put my speaker to the back of the instrument and started playing around with some of the sounds. I set up a little mix station in my attic, and while running those sounds through the back, played around with some of the different speaker setups and settings. I ended up recording on my Warm Audio 47, my Shure SM7B, and tweaked some of the settings and positioning. I also thought, why not make this a percussive instrument? Plus, it was a good way to get rid of some stress on this nightmare of an instrument. With my final recordings captured, it was finally time to say goodbye and head back to my home in Chicago, and I even got a little friend to come with me for some moral support on the final stretch. So let's take a look at some of the recording processes and techniques used in my DAW. Alright, so diving into some of the DAW work. This right here is basically what I recorded into the mic for my initial sing that I was eventually able to play back through and have a consistent audio source to work with. So after chopping it up, this is what the higher pitched soprano looked like, and it doesn't sound good, but we're working with it. Here you go. It's a little choppy, a little rough, but we're working with it. We got the tenor one as well. And then
the bass.
Like earth. And you know I had to put some Melodyne on that thing, so I ended up pitch correcting it. You can see a Melodyne over here. Just kind of lining them up with the score, the original score. So this is what that sounded like afterward.
Like earth, smound for thee.
So again, shitty vocals. I guess they matched up harmonically, but that is the source that I ended up putting into the speaker and then running into my instrument. So after all that, I ended up recording it several different ways. And again, these blue items right here, these are just these bounced down with Melodyne, safe computer processing power. So I would basically solo this. I would hard pan them right, so it would only come out of the one speaker that I had set up. And then I would basically just record into it. And you can see over here, I tried a few different setups, right? So I had the warm audio mic that's right here. I had it in Omni mode, and I called it position 1 because I played with a couple different positions. So this is what that sounded like on its own. Again, I recorded each track individually, but for the sake of time, I'll just kind of show you what all three sounded like. Oh, I have my bus on, sorry.
Like earth, smound for thee.
So yeah, that's kind of what we came up with. It's panned to the left right now because I ended up actually using all of the recordings. I thought it gave it a little bit more depth. Obviously, the instrument itself didn't have too much of an effect as I had hoped. So I kind of had to get creative, and I ended up taking the 4 different things. I had an Omni for the Warm 47. I had a different position for the same in Omni. I had the Warm 47 in cardioid mode for that same position. Wow, I cannot talk. And then also an SM57 for that first position. So as you can hear, a little bit different. Let me maybe show one that's pan center, because this was the one that I really liked the most, was the 47 in cardioid in the first position. So here you go. And just to demonstrate kind of the comparison, I will show just this one. It's kind of hard to tell. It sort of has like this verby kind of weird effect, not quite like a chorus, but nonetheless, it definitely sounds different than the original version that I had recorded. So from there, I took all of these, and then I also added in the kick drums. So that was, me bashing the hammer into the entire instrument itself. And I don't know how I'm going to organize this video yet. Maybe I'll drop it in here. Maybe I'll put it in before. But either way, you'll get a sense of what I was kind of trying to do. So with all of these combined, and a little bit, I just dipped out some of like the harsher frequencies. This is what it kind of sounded like.
Like earth, smound for thee.
And that high-pitched one, the soprano, yikes. Oh well. So those are kind of what they sounded like. I actually ended up creating a bus, sending them over to this Voxverb, and adding some kind of rich reverb to it. And I can pull up the settings for this. But kind of wanted to cut off the high end, somewhat of a long decay, really wet, and then just kind of blended it in. Uh, and then for the kick drum, the kicks were weird, so I had to do a good amount of processing on them because they weren't really getting that like timpani, almost bass drum kind of thump to them. So I did do a little bit of processing, but just for the sake of it, I'll show you the original sample with all the effects turned off. Just kind of got that rattle to it. And my original sample, I had a bunch of them. You can see here. I just picked the one I like the most. And so with the processing on, which was EQ, verb, and then more EQ, sounded something like this. And that second one's louder because I think it looks like it's starting kind of halfway through that sample. But if I turn my loop mode off, yeah, I really like how long that is. Just trying to go for that, again, that timpani bass drum sound with that long echo. But anyways, getting down to the final tracks, this is what I sort of came up with. So let me unmute the Vox verb because I added verb to a lot of the these final things, and actually even added a chorus effect. I wasn't really able to achieve what I wanted to with the build of the instrument. So in order to kind of achieve that, I took the simple route here and just threw on a couple choruses to kind of add depth to the layers of the vocals. So here's what everything sounds like. That last one, yeah. So the plan is I just kind of looped this really big. I didn't want any tails to get cut off. I didn't want to have to deal with looping inside of Unity. So I figured I'd just have a huge track, play the game. It isn't going to last that long. This recording's almost 2.25 minutes. So the plan is just to pull that into the game, kind of have it play, and then each individual track is going to kind of layer itself in as you go up in level, which we'll see later in the video. But that's the rundown of the DAW recordings. And yeah, cool. So I made a really expensive death trap of an instrument that didn't really create the amount of effects that I really wanted to. Recorded my shitty vocals through them, and basically made a terrible 4-bar version of what was already a musical masterpiece. This didn't really prove any technical proficiency, right? Also, since my, sciencey physics approach kind of went straight out the door in terms of making those resonance in the pipes. Once construction started and, all that woodworking and bending of the metal and stuff kind of threw everything off. I still kind of wanted to scratch that itch within this project. So a couple months back, I made a video game in Unreal Engine that demonstrates live volume attenuation based on altitude in the air. So on the ground, normal decibel level, and then on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, there's space where there's no sound. So there is this kind of curve based on air pressure, temperature, density, all those different parameters that sound as you go up, is going to change. Excuse me. I made this, this game, and I made a video along with it. And I'm going to actually just chop and put part of that video straight into this one. But there were a few intentions with this. I wanted, a simple interactive music system that was using the the music stems that I created with my instrument into this game. Um, I don't want the music necessarily to be changed with altitude. I want like a slider basically that's going to say, hey, you can have the music on, uh, or you can have it off, whatever. But then, as you'll see in the video, there's a little object, and as you go up levels, it gets quieter and quieter based on how high you are up. So I was going to swap out that sample with something a little bit more God of War-esque, like this noise right here.
Boy.
And fix that in as well. So yeah, quick note, the video that I'm going to paste in here, it was recorded on a different microphone. I think I used my MacBook microphone. It sounds really boxy and bad. Just know I'm aware. But for the sake of simplicity, and I already have, the whole video kind of built out, I'm just going to stick it in here, and then probably about halfway through, I'm going to jump back in, interject, and then talk about some of the changes I made to it to tailor it more towards. So yeah, go ahead and check it out. Now, before I dive into the actual video game itself, I do want to talk about some of the inspiration I had to make this project altogether. During my time at the Blackbird Academy in Nashville, I had this fantastic professor named Mark Rubel, and one of the questions that we talked about was whether or not you could 100% soundproof a studio. Mark's response was, in theory, yes, but practically, no. And I sort of took that personally. I decided to try and make him a special project that he wouldn't forget. What I was trying to prove was that a studio could be 100% soundproofed if it's suspended by magnetic levitation. As you can see here, I did some woodwork. I bought this little cheap magnetic floating device thing. I'm not really sure what you call it, but essentially this magnet right over here sits and floats with no contact. The idea was to place this miniature studio with a speaker inside, suspended by magnetic levitation, and then sealed inside of a larger container. This container is routed to a vacuum pump, which I then pumped all of the air out, and as I was playing music, the air pressure dropped, and thus the sound pressure level dropped. I decided to include a report on this as well. You can see that as the absolute pressure approached 0 psi, the sound level in decibels dropped dramatically. I then took this a step further and decided to relate this project towards altitude, air pressure, and sound intensity. I borrowed the barometric formula equation from Wikipedia, as well as the sound pressure level equation. Now, it's important to note that this barometric formula assumes a temperature lapse rate of 0. We could theoretically model this using these two equations shown here and here. However, for the sake of simplicity, I thought that it was safe to assume that the reference temperature was constant. So after going through this whole report, I realized that the practical application to this project was really in regards to altitude versus sound level. The higher we increase our altitude, the lower the pressure, and the lower the pressure, the less air molecules there are to transfer acoustical energy. So what the heck does this have to do with building a video game? Well, I wanted to create a game that as you change altitude, the sound actually mimics real-world physics and attenuates properly. In order to do this, I created a very, very simple game. It consists of 4 different levels, each level corresponding to a different height. So we have one at sea level, one about 9,000 meters up, one about 17,000 meters up, and one all the way up in the stratosphere at about 32,000 meters. I also created little elevators that'll take you to each platform. Lastly, I created a sound object on every level with a collider that triggers a sound. Unreal Engine's stock third-person character was used. For the elevator, I created a simple enclosure and also included a box collider to trigger the elevator. The elevator blueprint is relatively simple, with an on-component begin overlap triggering the event. There is then a check to ensure that the player is the object entering the trigger, which is then routed to a timeline that outputs a lerp vector, with the starting position and the ending position as inputs. The return value of the lerp vector then acts as an input for the set relative location function. As for the SFX object, this was really just simply a cube with a sphere collider around it. The interesting piece really lies in the event graph. We have a basic sound triggered on collider overlap, with a check to ensure that the player is the one entering the collider. If that check succeeds, this ding-dong sound effect will play.
Boy.
Now, in terms of relating all of this air pressure and altitude into this blueprint, the first step was to get the height of the player in meters. We have a simple getActor location that splits the array into 3 different vectors, and from that z vector converts centimeters into meters. Once we have the height, we're ready to plug and chug. This math expression calculates the atmospheric pressure in relation to sea level pressure. Remember this guy? So now that we have the pressure in relation to the player's height, we can then calculate the sound pressure level. I broke this equation out into 3 different math expressions just for clarity's sake. First, we have the pressure over the threshold of hearing. We then take a logarithm of that value and multiply it by 20. This last step takes the logarithmic ratio of the maximum sound pressure level at the given height h to the max sound pressure level at sea level. This returns a value in between 0 and 1, which we then add to the volume multiplier of the play sound function. I also included a print string function to display that ratio each time we trigger the sound. Lastly, I borrowed a widget blueprint from YouTube to display some of the metering levels of all the sounds in the game. Finally, it's time to see this in action. Alright, so this is where I kind of cut in and explain some of the changes that I made to sort of make this project a little bit more accompanied to, or tailored to. So basically really what I did, I swapped out that sound effect that you heard earlier. I love that, the boy sound from God of War. And then I also added in just a bunch of really simple cues for the music. So the soprano, bass, tenor, and then the kick as well. I wanted to make something dynamic where, as you go up a level, each thing kind of rises in, but based on time and the constraints and the way I sort of allocated my time, I'm sort of short on it. So what I've done instead is just throw those sounds in there, as sort of background music. And then, I think in the earlier video I had mentioned this, but over on the left I have this metering system. So I'll start out with no background music, just the boy cueing, the boy sound effect cueing.
Boy.
Right, so you can see it peaks at around like 12, 13, 14 dB. It's also cool.
Boy.
The number up in the top left, that
Boy.
0.9. That's the equivalent of sea level. I think like the one discrepancy is the fact that the sound source is from that box and it's like a couple units up. But anyways, this is sea level, 0 meters as we go up. World's fastest elevator. Wee-oo! This is kind of near like where Mount Everest would be, 8,800 meters.
Boy.
And you see about a 10 decibel reduction. And then flying on up even further. This is about where our Concorde jet flies at 17,000 meters.
Boy.
Just barely here at 21 decibels. And then the Stratosphere one is almost inaudible. 32,000 meters.
Boy.
I don't know if that's even going to register.
Boy.
But you can see the number in the top left,
Boy.
0.00433. So again, it's taking that barometric pressure and the sound pressure level, altitude, and kind of tying it all together. And this would be a huge game in terms of like download size. But to me, I think that this can obviously be scalable. It doesn't have to be down to actual meters or centimeters. Or I just thought it was a cool application. So anyways, putting this all together, if I put these volume multipliers back to 1, and then play the game, we'll have the background music going as well. And again, that meter is just checking for the sound effect that gets triggered.
Boy.
Yeah, so that's the basic rundown of the game, the demonstration. Again, I wish the music was a little bit more dynamic, but again, I kind of fell short on time. But I'm glad, I allocated my time where I did. I thought that building that instrument was a lot more interesting. I'm sure a lot of people have done something like this. So either way, I had a blast doing this, and I think this is a really cool application. So I'm probably going to kick it back over to myself and like a little wrap up video and summary. So I'll catch you there. All right, everyone. Well, this is going to wrap it up. Just to give a quick kind of summary of everything. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much again for the opportunity. I had such a blast making all this stuff. I think a lot of people are probably looking at me pretty weird right now after hearing what I've been building and seeing the stuff in my parents' house. They were selling the house during the time that I was building all of it. So a lot of people who were coming in taking tours were probably thinking that they were going to take the house of some crazed maniac, but whatever. But anyways, the reason I really wanted to kind of do this project in the first place is for a couple of reasons. I wanted it to be original. I know, the third test was more for technical proficiency, and sure, I have a bunch of WISE projects, FMOD projects that I could dive into, but I figured, it's probably done more often than not. And I kind of wanted to express, my kind of side of how I approach art and sound and projects and do it in like a much different way than anyone else has ever really done. I assume no one else has tried to make an instrument like that, but who knows? I could be wrong. And I also wanted to try something outside of my comfort zone. I have a mechanical engineering background. I certainly don't have a carpentry or metalworking background. And getting to kind of learn all that stuff and sort of fail at it, kind of get by okay with it. It was fun to learn along the way. And then I just really wanted to prove to you guys, just how hard I'm willing to work to get something like the product that I got. The sound itself might not be the coolest sound in the world, but the point of it really is the process that goes into it. It's, and excuse my language, a blast doing this stuff for me, whether it be building all this stuff, designing, trying to think outside the box, just to create some kind of unique sound, you make some kind of unique piece of art. Between the other two tests, helping my parents out with their house, juggling a job as a bartender at night, I was putting in hours and hours and hours, probably averaging maybe a couple hours of sleep a night. And I'm not here to say that for the, oh, boo-hoo, Will, poor you. I'm saying it because I genuinely enjoy doing this stuff. It makes me happy. And, I just, the passion for it is certainly there. So yeah, it's really just that process that's been driving me, and I'm just lucky to be able to present to you guys, and hopefully I can elaborate on some of the work a little bit more, as I'm not the best person over video and recording myself. I think of myself as much better talking live and in person, and not having a chance to pause and stop. But anyways, I will definitely wrap this up. If you guys have more questions about anything, please feel free to ask me anything at all, even if we want to dive into other projects regarding more technical proficiency or whatnot. I'm happy to do that. So thank you guys again. I appreciate it, and I look forward to hearing from you guys. Take care.